Good morning. Happy 2026 to everybody. I hope everybody's New Year's Day was good. I hope your New Year's Eve was even better. 2025 was a hell of a ride, and not in the good way for most of us, it feels like. And I'm hoping that for everybody who sees this, your 2026 is going to be much better. Now, let me go ahead and preface this video so that way if it's something that you're not interested in, you can go ahead and swipe away, click away, whatever you want to do. For those of you who are going to stay and watch, please hit the little heart button, like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Tell me hello. That's all I ask. Just a simple, hey, how you doing? Would be greatly appreciated. I will try to keep this brief, but you all know that I am extremely wordy and tend to ramble a little bit. For those who have watched me before, you're familiar. I tend to chase those rabbits down those rabbit holes, and I will come back around to where I started at the beginning. Just stay with me. There is a point. I promise. There is a method to the madness. On my way into work this morning, on my morning kind of getting ready routine, I listen to podcasts, watch videos, that kind of thing, just to kind of start my day. And this morning, and a little bit last night, I saw a creator who I have followed recently, and because she makes a ton of sense. Now, she's one of those people who's a deconstructionist. And if you don't know what that is, it's people who were formerly Christian and have, for whatever their journey is, has decided to leave the faith, and in most cases have declared atheism. And it's not due to lack of faith, due to lack of trying. These people were seriously in the faith and saw enough inconsistencies that they started asking questions, and the questions weren't being answered. And there they are. Anyway, that's what deconstructionism is. And I like her videos because a lot of it is political. And in this day and age, there's no real picking apart someone of faith from their political beliefs. And agree with, disagree with, what have you, for better or ill. That's kind of the climate that we find ourselves in today, where faith and politics have become intertwined in a way that was never intended by our founding fathers. And we see a lot more creators like this one, and I'm about to say it's kind of ironic, she's a bit of a godsend. Anywho, she had posted a video that was pretty close to my heart, and it's something that anybody who's watched my previous videos know that I've talked about before, which is feeling like we are getting a return on our investment. Our investment being the tax dollars that we pay, local, state, and federal taxes, and how nobody seems to feel like we're getting anything for our dollar anymore. We wouldn't put up with that from any other entity that we are giving our hard-earned dollars to. So why would we not be trying to hold these entities, local, federal, and state, to task on what they're doing with our federal dollars? Now, I can already foresee there being somebody who's like, oh, but we're absolutely holding to task our government. And that's why we're like, we don't like taxes, and we don't want any more taxes, and we're trying to privatize everything. Let's start there. What exactly has privatization done for you? we have seen, at least in my generation, Gen X, we have seen lots of companies, small companies, being bought up by big companies. And while we still apparently still have some sort of antitrust, monopoly laws, it doesn't feel like that they're being enforced, I guess would be a good way to say it, or that they're working. There seems to still be a lot of, we're seeing it right now with Netflix and HBO, and who else is trying to buy them? Paramount, hostile takeovers, etc. We're seeing a lot of that. And one of the arguments, just in case you're unaware, one of the arguments that these companies are stating that this isn't a matter of antitrust, this isn't like anti-competition, this isn't anti-capitalism, that is quite simply that it's not to take over like HBO. They're not the same thing. That it's not a streaming service or something to that degree. And please, by all means, correct me if I'm wrong. I know I'm circling the right thing, but not quite getting the words out in the proper way to make it as correct as it could be. So, by all means, fix it in the comments. But it's ridiculous to think that they're not a competitor and they're just trying to eat up a competitor. That's truly what they're trying to do. No. They are absolutely trying to do that. They're just grasping at straws, whatever they could put out to the SEC to allow the SEC to thumbs up this merger. Privatization has done nothing good for the American people. We have seen the privatization of so many different things. We have seen the antitrust, the bigger companies just swallowing up these tiny companies, and the only thing it has done is raise the cost for all of us and created less competition. Competition is so good. I can remember when there was a ton of airlines. There was a bunch. I'm also of the last generation to see when we could actually walk up to the gate with our family and watch them board the planes and watch their planes taxi to the runway and take off from the gate. From the gate, I can remember smoking at airport terminals. That's how old I am. So, but I can remember airlines. I can remember commercials for airlines like Pan Am. I know there's issues there. Just bear with me. I know that there have been lots of other companies. Let's take, now this is one where I don't know that they necessarily took over smaller businesses, but they definitely destroyed a lot of mom and pop businesses in our communities. Walmart. They came in, and I can remember initially, I want to say, and again, somebody correct me if I'm wrong in this, but memory tells me that I remember seeing commercials where all their products were made here in the USA, and maybe that was the original plan for the company. Maybe that was the original thing. They are absolutely not following that business model anymore, and we have seen the collapse of manufacturing in the U.S. in part by that. The biggest part was NAFTA, Bill Clinton era thing. I have my disagreements there. But we are seeing all of these mergers and all of this privatization of prisons. What sense does that make? What sense does that make? That is zero. Because if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And you're going to take something that absolutely should never be a moneymaker, never be a moneymaker, and turn it into something where corruption is going to run rampant. Not that it doesn't in government entities, it absolutely does. But you're increasing the odds of that happening by making it a private company, a private corporation. And I can hear people now, but it takes the responsibility of the tax dollars off of the citizen. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. They're subsidized. They are a private company that's getting paid by the government, which means they can raise and lower those prices as they see fit. And do you think they'll ever lower those? No, absolutely not. Which means it's only going to cost us more tax dollars in the long run. Knock it off. Stop it. One of the more frightening things, now this is coming from a very conspiratorial kind of place, so I'm very cautious with how I'm treading here because I do not want to be lumped in with conspiratorial thinking at all. However, there is a movie, and I can't remember the name of it right now, that is very dear to me, and I watched together. And the biggest takeaway I got from this movie, and it was all about like the UAPs, aka UFOs, for any of you who are like old like me and haven't learned what that is. Unidentified flying object, or unknown or unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP thing, I think. But in that, they said something terrifying, which was that we have a bunch of private companies who hold U.S. intelligence information. And I'm sure in the contracts they have with the federal government that there are lots of legalese stating that you can't do business with foreign governments, that you can do this and do that under penalty of insert penalty here, treason, what have you. I'm sure that there's that language in all those contracts. However, there's information that because they're private companies, the U.S. government cannot get their hands on. Now, please tell me, when you're building equipment that our U.S. military uses that's supposed to keep our country safe, do tell how not having access to this proprietary information is beneficial to our safety and protection. Explain it to me like my kindergartner. Use the fat crayons. Use the fat crayons that have the flat sides so they don't roll away. I need some instruction here on how a private company that ostensibly could do business with whoever the hell they want to, that has military plans and secrets for the U.S. government and military, is benefiting our safety. They're not beholden to the same standards that our government employees are held to. They're held to the standards of their stockholders. They're held to the standards that the people who want to make money from them are making money from them. So tell me how privatization there benefits. Now, I've also seen a bunch of talk on privatization of VA benefits. Now, let's break this down a little bit. Let's start with the bare bones basics. The purpose of a corporation, of a business, is to increase their bottom line, is to make money, is to make a profit. So that way, the person who owns said corporation, or the people who own said corporation, let's say it's somebody who owns a stock, um, it's a privately held business, meaning that it is not owned by the U.S. government. It is not public property. Now, we need to make some clarifications here. For the purposes of most things in general, but especially for the purpose of these explanations, we need to define public and private. Public is something that is owned wholly by the government, be it local, state, or federal government. It is paid for with our tax dollars, and therefore it is publicly funded, meaning it is a public property, public owned entity, public. Private is everything else. It is owned by individuals through stocks, through private single proprietorship, through LLCs, through whatever it is not paid for by tax dollars. It is paid for by consumers, whoever those consumers may be. The consumers may, in this example, be the federal government, as we have contracts, private contracts, or we have contracts through private vendors that are paid for with our tax dollars. That does not mean that they are a public entity. They are not wholly funded and owned by the U.S. government, right? They may be paying for a contract through a tax dollar type program, but they are not wholly owned and controlled by the federal government. They are controlled by a contract. Now that contract is done through the court system, it's filed, all of that good stuff, but it is still, that company is still owned privately through all the ways I mentioned earlier, all of that. I say all that to say this because there seems to be a confusion when somebody enters, say, and I mentioned Walmart before, somebody enters a Walmart, they're like, oh, this is public property. It is not. That is a privately held company. They can make the rules for the property that they have to whatever they need to be. If they need to check your receipt at the door, that is up to them to do that. That is their rights to do that as a privately held business. They are not publicly funded. They are subsidized, and we can absolutely get into that later. They are not owned wholly by the government. They are absolutely a private institution through every person who owns a stock with the Walmart Corporation. Now that we've kind of made that clarification, the fact that companies like Boeing, for example, Lockheed Martin, and a few others, are private entities that our tax dollars are largely padding the wallets of disturbs me to my core. Because I want to say at some point in the past, the U.S. government had factories for military equipment. And it was government personnel that ran these companies. And because of that, all of that information, all of those plans, all of those blueprints, all of that information was 1,000% ours. If that was still around, they would be able to be accessed with redactions, I'm sure, to protect the safety of our military. Be able to be requested through the Freedom of Information Act. Now, as U.S. citizens, you should all know that there are some information that we absolutely should not be privy to, because if we're privy to it, then that means that those who would take ill action against us, bad actions against us, would have access to that same information. So let's go ahead and put that out there. Now, going back to the privately funded thing, we don't have access to that anymore. And that's a problem. We need to have access to that. as far as like we need to have access, our government needs to have access to all of that information. We shouldn't have to file subpoenas for that information. We should be able to be like, call up whoever, as long as you have the proper security clearance within the U.S. government, and say, hey, I need to know what's going on with this project right now. And here's my security clearance. Here's why I need to know this. Give me that information, and it should be provided. Our tax dollars at work. Now, with regards to veteran care, where they're wanting to privatize veteran care, these are people who I think all of us can agree voluntarily, in most recent cases. We do still have some that were called to service, that were Vietnam vets, etc., and through the draft and all of that, and they should absolutely be taken care of as well. I'm just using this as an example, and even the ones who were called to service, they still didn't. They didn't dodge the draft like, I don't know, a certain Cheeto Bonito I can think of right now. A certain taco, which is really appropriate for this example. Love that name. That's where it started. That's where the tacos started. Anywho, I digress. See also beginning of this video where I mentioned my digressions. I can't understand where a company could see privatizing VA care, healthcare benefits of all sorts, is profitable. These are people whose body has been broken. Even for those who are retiring military and get those benefits as retiree. They're not medically retired. They're just retired, right? U.S. military puts a lot of wear and tear on the human body. And for those who have seen active duty, a lot of wear and tear on the human soul. And we need to take care of these people. They signed a blank check to make sure that we are absolutely taken care of. And we owe them that care. If you're a private company, knowing that going in, you're going to be paying out money to make sure that care is rendered, where does the profit come in? Where does the profit come in? Does the profit come in raising rates on the veterans? Does it come from raising rates on the federal government, who we would be paying our taxes for to foot that bill? Where does the profits come in? Because this is strictly a payout game. How do you make money on the veterans? Maybe I just don't understand how that works. But how does that work? Like, how do you privatize VA care? How does that work? Tell me how the money happens. Tell me how the profit happens, because I don't see how that's a profitable venture. This is something that our U.S. government asked U.S. citizens to do. And in some cases, don't know if anybody knows this, non-U.S. citizens, with the promise that they would become citizens once they've done their service, or while they're completing their service, as an expedited way to citizenship. Explain to me how these individuals who signed on the dotted line that, hey, yes, I will allow the U.S. government to use me and abuse me for the purposes of keeping this country safe and put my life on the line, how them and their families, in the case of like a Gold Star family who is still entitled to that veterans benefits after their check was cashed. Explain to me how those benefits are supposed to make money, because I don't see it. I don't see how that's supposed to happen. Where is this a good thing? We've already found out, as a conversation a little while ago, that privatizing the war machine was absolutely a horrendous thing, and it's coming back to bite us in the ass, and to the tune of trillions of dollars at this point that our tax dollars have funded to these private companies, where now, if you look at it, we could probably take those same tax dollars and put it into rebuilding a public, government-owned war machine, of making our own, making our own equipment, weaponry, aircraft, ships, etc., using American citizens on American soil, creating millions of jobs. And it's now wholly owned by the U.S. government. The U.S. government now has full access, full control over everything that is put in the air, the ocean, or the land, as far as anything defense related is concerned. I wish we would go back to that. I think it's a money saver. I think it's something that would also create jobs and put tons of Americans to work. And we could then specially train individuals to do just these tasks, just these jobs. That sounds like a win-win to me, and it sounds like we'd be getting way more value for the dollar that we put in. There is a part 2 that will be coming for this video, probably not until next week. But I think delving into this idea of getting a return on our investment, the amount of money that we're investing via our tax dollars, and being able to not just let those tax dollars go to some special interest, some private entity, some corporation that is just using your tax dollars to pad their wallet. I think that's important. I'm not above companies making money. That is not what I'm saying here. Absolutely. I think that we need to have more small businesses. I think that we need to see more Americans prosper. 1,000%. If you have a business idea and you can make that work, by all means, make that work. But it should not be at the expense of the U.S. government, the state government, the local government, and there's those tax dollars that these people pay for that. I think that if you want to be a business, that you should absolutely be making that money from private citizens and not from the public dollar. And again, go back to public versus private. I think that if we really want to know where our tax dollars go, less privatization is the key, because then we have access to what is being done by way of FOIA requests. And that's important. We need to be able, within reason, be able to keep these manufacturers, these points of people who are receiving our tax dollars accountable for what we're paying for. So let's do that. Let's have a conversation. Pop me some comments down below. If you watched all the way to here, again, give me a like, hit the subscribe button. This is a conversation that's important. It's a conversation that we need to have. Thank you for watching. I hope everybody has a blessed 2026 and be watching for part 2.